Today is Thursday, Parashat Yitro. Yesterday evening in our Wednesday night class, we learned from Mesilat Yesharim about the virtue of Zehirut. The quality of Zehirut could be translated as vigilance, or being careful with one's actions, or being scrupulous. And the chapter here by the Ramchal speaks about the importance of constantly examining one's ways, if they are commendable, if we're acting in the proper way, if we're not acting in the proper way. And this takes some amount of effort on the part of the person to always consider his actions. Yirmiyahu, the Navi, the prophet, he bemoaned the actions of the people who were not paying attention to what they're doing. Sometimes a person gets into a routine and doesn't pay attention to the consequences of his actions, or is he acting in the proper way or not acting in the proper way. And the Ramchal says that the Yetzer puts a burden on a person to prevent him from being vigilant, for being careful, so that he's so preoccupied with all sorts of things that his attention is not there to consider what he's doing. And in a way, this is what Paro intended to do when he said Tichvad avodah la'anashim, that made the work be made harder for people, so they'll be so busy with their work they won't be paying attention to anything else. And the Ramchal goes on to say that a person needs wisdom and a great effort in order to overcome the Yetzer Hara. And he used the word tahbulot, to have strategy to overcome the Yetzer Hara, but always to realize that it is Hashem who's with us and makes it possible for us to accomplish that. We do our part, we consider what our actions are, and we overcome the temptations of Yetzer Hara. Then he goes on to explain that it takes also understanding of what is good and what is bad, to a person to realize what is the proper behavior, what is not the proper behavior, what is the tov, what is the ra, in other words, in Hebrew, what is good, what is bad. First of all is to understand. And then, number two is to evaluate our actions. Are they according to what is good or according to what is bad? And he speaks about two aspects. Number one, before we take an action, to examine whether it's proper or not proper. And even after the action has been taken, to always evaluate our actions and consider whether we acted properly or not acted properly, and then to strengthen the proper actions. And if we find out that we acted in an improper way, to make a strategy how to overcome that situation and how to avoid coming in the same situation in the future, so that we can avoid such situation in the future. And then he speaks about also the fashpesh and le mashmesh. Number one, to evaluate our actions, whether they're good or they're bad. And number two, even when our actions are good, we have to consider, we have to be memashmesh. Just like a person who's checking a cloth to see the quality of a cloth, we should also check even our good actions, whether they're all done properly or not properly. Sometimes a person can intend to do a mitzvah, but have with it certain elements that make that mitzvah not a perfect way. A person can give charity, but if he gives it in a way that is disrespectful to the needy person, even though he's done a mitzvah, there is an element of negativity in there. And that's why a person should also examine the good deeds to make sure that they're perfectly good. He also advises a person to daily set aside time to examine our actions. We get involved in so many different things throughout the day. The question is, do we spend time also to evaluate how are we acting? Are we doing right? Are we doing wrong? And he advises a person to set aside time every day, and it could be at the end of the day, to review and examine what the person has done. And then he says that a person has to be careful not to act like a blind person or somebody, let's say, who puts a blindfold and walks right next to a river and in a place where it's precarious and he might fall into danger. So that way also a person has to be careful with his actions so that he doesn't just walk around like a blind person or like a person who walks in the darkness who may stumble and fall, but rather to take great care with our actions, with what we do while we're involved, and even after the fact to evaluate them so that we can act properly and to learn what is right and wrong. So this is from the book of Mesilat Yesharim we've been learning on Wednesday nights here in our synagogue, and this is just an overview of what we covered yesterday night. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.